What do you make of this decision by President Biden to give approval to Ukraine to use their weapons long range into Russia?
I welcome it very strongly. I think it's important, and I hope it is a precursor to the UK granting full autonomy on use of Storm Shadow. And the reason is actually quite straightforward. The fact that there are thousands of North Korean troops supporting Russia is a significant escalation. It's a worrying development, and I think given all the support we've given to Ukraine and the attacks we've seen in just the last 24 hours, the continued slaughter of innocent Ukrainians, we have to continue doing all that we can to support them.
I guess the question is, why now? Do you think this could be framed as weak from President Biden? If he felt this was warranted, to wait until after the election, or is there some other reason as to why now is legitimate in terms of timing?
Well, I think the key point, and I think it was referred to by the president's spokesman, Keir Starmer referred to this, and I welcome that, was this point about North Korea. I mean, we just have to turn this around and say, you know, how do you think the Russians would react if suddenly 10,000 NATO troops were supporting Ukraine? It's a massive escalation in that sense. And it's not just that; it's the nature of the continued bombardment. I met a delegation of Ukrainian MPs last week, and when they talk about the continued nature of these bombardments, glide bombs, drones, etc., it's not just frightening for them. That the toll it's starting to impact on their country is terrible, and continued attacks on critical infrastructure. I do think it's the right time.
So you don't think it should have come sooner?
Well, look, we were calling for it from the summer, just to be clear. Obviously, these are complex matters. I think on this we had to move with the Americans, so I welcome the fact that the President has given this steer, and as I say, I hope it now leads to the UK doing the same.
Can you understand, I know the American political system is different from ours here, the transition of the power is brutally fast, with moving trucks always in Downing Street imminently. Could you understand the dissatisfaction from Trump supporters to see this happen between election and inauguration day?
Well, you know, Biden is still the president. That's how their constitution works. He has to respond to events as they are changing. And I hope that all those on all sides in the US would look at the fact you've got thousands of North Korean troops, and there may be many more to come. That's a pretty significant strategic moment. I think all of us recognise the wider threat here from potential adversaries, and so I think it's the right step to take. And I think from a UK point of view, we've now got to focus on what we can do, and that's about Storm Shadow, but it's also about what more we can do to support Ukraine. We'll have the 1,000th day since the invasion tomorrow, and I look forward to the UK government continuing to take a lead with our strong support.
What is your view on what the UK-China relationship should be in the coming years?
Well, I think it's certainly important that we have constructive dialogue with them. I believe the Prime Minister will meet them at the G20. The caveat really is we were very much, this is eyes wide open, recognise the huge threat they potentially pose. You know, when I was at the Ministry of Defence, we were very clear about trying to reduce, for example, the amount of Chinese content we had in our supply chains. And I think that's the sort of thing the government should be doing. And I think that it's one thing for the Prime Minister to promise that this meeting is about UK growth and security, but that's quite a challenge to pull both of those off. And he must be clear to the Chinese about the human rights abuses we've seen in Hong Kong and elsewhere.
But in terms of actually meeting him, which of course hasn't happened since I think Theresa May, Prime Minister to President, that's a legitimate thing to be doing?
I accept that, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can't ignore China. They are a major nation. They are a huge economic power. But I think, as I said, the key phrase Prime Minister Sunak used to use was eyes wide open, being very aware of the potential threat, being very clear to them about our concerns on human rights and so on. And of course, we expect Prime Minister Keir Starmer to be making those points when he has that meeting to express our concern about those issues, particularly, for example, in Hong Kong.
If in the years to come the US puts pressure on us to take tougher positions on China than perhaps we otherwise would have done, what should we do?
Well, the US is a very close ally of ours and will be, whoever is the president. I very much welcome President Trump following his election and look forward to working closely with his administration. I think that the point is, because we have a close relationship with them, these are things we need to engage in, as a strong ally. We'll see what happens in the future. My immediate focus is obviously Shadow Defence Secretary on what's been announced. I think it's a good development. It's an absolute priority for this country that we stand strong with Ukraine, given the way that Russia has behaved, its aggression, the unprovoked invasion, and I think that it's more important than ever that we stand strongly with the US and strongly in support of Ukraine.
And just finally, Shadow Defence Secretary, if the UK permissions as relates to Storm Shadows is forthcoming, as is expected in the days ahead, and then indeed those weapons are used on Russian territory, does it put Brits here on British soil in danger for Russian retaliation?
I think what puts us, if you like, Brits here in danger would have been if we hadn't helped Ukraine to stand up to Russia. We have not deployed directly into the Ukrainian theatre. North Korean troops have, in contrast. That is a massive escalation. What we've done is recognise here is a sovereign democratic nation invaded without any provocation by a dictatorship, subjected to terrible bombing, loss of civilian life and military personnel, huge casualties on the Russian side, which Putin seems oblivious to. In a situation like that, we have to stand up to that bully. Otherwise, ultimately, yes, we will be in the firing line.
And just finally, whilst you're here, can I ask how you're planning to vote on the assisted dying bill?
In favour.
And that's because of a long-standing belief of wanting to get to this place? Or?
Well, so in 2015, I voted against, actually. And I voted against because although in principle I do see the argument of having this right in extreme circumstances, it should be said, very narrow circumstances, I felt that the bill was not strong enough in terms of safeguards. What I've wanted was to be able to enable people to have this choice, but in very limited circumstances, but with strong safeguards to avoid abuse. And I think, and I hope this is the case, we have that in terms of the bill that's coming before us.
Thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you, James Cartlidge.